As an NACD governance fellow, it is a particular pleasure to be here today speaking to you about data, risks, and opportunities in the boardroom and beyond. But before we kind of dig into some of the content, I want to ask, how's the buzzword bingo going? You guys been playing this, right? Big data, IoT, AI, innovation, you've been hearing about these things, right, the last few days. This kind of thing makes what we do as board members or as executives very challenging, right? Because there's a lot of words and sometimes it's difficult to cut through that noise. And that's one of the biggest challenges out there when it comes to data. Part of this is driven by the fact that there are dynamics around technology development where we hear about things and they're almost treated as fait accompli. They are treated as things that are already here. And yet they're still very much in early parts of development. I know I talked about this on a panel yesterday. How many of you have seen a video on YouTube or somewhere else, one of these Now This videos, and it's some new technology that solves a major problem of the world. And you watch it, and it's like 30 seconds long, and it has motivational music, and you're done watching it, and you go, that problem is solved, and you close the window, right? This is because of a dynamic I call hype locusts. Right? And you've got this dynamic, right? So you've got companies, they create these videos, they're quite inspiring, you've got a new technology, but it's really, if we think about development, right, it's somewhere between ideation and experimentation, right? There's other phases like push to commercial development, early development, and then widespread adoption. But a lot of those videos, things are still in their beta phases. It's still in experimentation. It's not a done deal. But the video goes viral, and then it's on social media, and then it's on the business media, and it's everywhere. And the hype locusts swarm, right? And this creates a real problem because as a board member, you've got all these different technology words in the buzzword bingo and all these different things coming up, and it's very difficult to do your job and cut through all the technology noise. This is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to data, is cutting through that. And this hype locust dynamic makes it very, very challenging. The most important thing I would say to keep in mind is to always make sure any kind of technology you're looking at has positive ROI. An example where this has been particularly critical is something like, say, blockchain, right? In 2007, as Bitcoin rose, everyone was being asked, are you using blockchain? Are you doing blockchain? Is blockchain a thing at your company? And almost forced to, executives had to say, oh yeah, we're looking into it. What is it? I don't know, right? But yeah, we're on that, right? But now comes the time to get out the checkbook, and are we actually going to buy, do we actually need this? And that question is an important one to ask. Saying we're looking into it's fine, but actually paying for it, need to make sure there's ROI there. That's really important from a data standpoint. Now, yesterday I also held a session called the Navigating the Fog of Data, and I asked folks about their data nightmares. And it's very interesting because everyone's data nightmare, right, was not penny-wise, but it could have been, but everyone's data nightmare didn't have anything to do with a lack of computer processing power. On inability they needed a stronger computer. Everyone's problem was a breakdown of process. Somewhere, someone had not done one of the sort of basic fundamental things in a process to get to good analysis. And it's really quite mundane, but these fundamentals actually matter, right? You got to ask the right questions. Right now, you've got companies collecting data because that's what you're doing. Everyone wants big data. But the truth is, big data doesn't matter if it's not based on good data. And in order to get to good data, you need to start with some data, and you need to make sure you're going in the right way. Then you need to make sure you're scoping things right, you're collecting it right, you're cleaning the data, right? More than a lack of quantum computing, the biggest problem for companies is often someone didn't convert the currencies or the decimals in the wrong spot, or they mixed up imperial tons and metric tons. Right? That's a way bigger problem for most companies in their analysis than that they don't have quantum yet. Beyond that, testing and retesting results. We've heard anecdotes here, I've heard them elsewhere as well, where something in the process, the final deliverable, nobody really proofed it, there's something wrong in the end, no one's retesting. We built the model, we're putting it on a shelf, and that's it. And that's not how it works with data. So these things are really important. And a long term of data can be valuable if it's built on good data. Because if you don't have much, right, you look at this data point, you've got limited historical data, you're going to kind of draw, and well, it looks like it's kind of going a little bit sideways. But if you have good data and you've got a longer time series, you might realize, oh, actually on a trend, it's up and to the right. So the fundamentals, though, need to be in the right spot to get to that analysis. And it has less to do with the buzzword bingo and more to do with, honestly, a pretty boring, pretty normal kind of process, making sure people are following the right steps. That's often more important than the next technology that will be out there to augment your business. Another important thing for communication to you and from you in your roles is explaining the model. Right? This is a question that people say, you, me, them, everybody needs to be asking. You've got folks coming to your board, you need to ask them to explain the model. And if they can't explain it simply enough, tell them to go back to the drawing board. I'll give you an example. I've used this before, and it tends to resonate. So there's univariate macroeconomic analysis. In other words, a forecast with one variable. So when you see the outcome and you see the input, they look alike, right? Reasonable. But when you do a multivariate analysis, you've got a bunch of different inputs in the output, and they don't look alike. And sometimes folks go, well, why don't I see this in the end product? Why don't, if I want a correlation chart, it doesn't work? It's because multivariate analysis often has multiple different inputs. And the output doesn't work without one of the four here, for example, but they're all part of the same puzzle. So this is really important to understand, especially from a communication standpoint, because I've used this with clients a number of times. And if folks aren't explaining to your board what they're doing with data, as simple as making bread, you need to push on them hard. Because if they can't explain it simply, honestly, they don't understand what they're doing. Now, we are seeing more advanced technologies, and I'm not to check off a box on your bingo cards, but, quantum computing is becoming a thing. Just this week, Google's quantum computer solved a problem in about 3 minutes and 20 seconds that would have taken the fastest supercomputer on Earth 10,000 years to solve. Now, it's really good at solving certain kinds of problems, what are called non-deterministic, probabilistic things. In other words, this quantum computer that could do something in 3 minutes and 20 seconds that would take 10,000 years, it wasn't doing 2 plus 2, it was doing some unusual kind of factoring. That's complicated for a classical computer, and it's probabilistic. Now, that's not going to be the biggest problem in your organization about data. Any of the companies you serve are probably having bigger issues because people don't understand Excel. So think about those asymmetric risks as you're looking at data issues, right? I'd also say that things are not as they appear. Hence, this is not a GIF, right? So, and that's going to become even more true at the board level. So not only quantum computing, but artificial intelligence is going to add wrinkles of complexity to the things that you and your organizations will need to sort through. These are all pictures of people, cars, and pets that do not exist. Right? There's an entire website dedicated to this, right? This person does not exist.com. None of these things exist. I had a conversation earlier this week with an insurance company, and we were discussing the future of AI and what happens when you have people submitting insurance claims that don't exist. Not that the event didn't happen, but that even the person that's filing the claim for the event didn't happen, but everything around it has been created. the levels of depth for this are going to be a problem. And even text-wise, you're going to see this not just coming to a lazy high schooler near you, but OpenAI, which is an organization that was funded in part by Elon Musk and has received other funding from big tech companies. It's a nonprofit. This is a paragraph about the keywords for this were, for today's homework assignment, please describe the reasons for the U.S. Civil War, right? It's easy to identify why the Civil War happened because so many people and so many books and so much television tell us what it was about and da-da-da-da, right? It's not a great essay, but you know, it would probably get like a B or a B plus in like 8th or 9th grade. And if you got like a sleepy teacher in junior or senior year, it might still get a B, even for a person higher up in high school. So that's right now. Imagine what AI can write with a prompt a couple years from now. And what that means for, say, cybersecurity or for your business practices. Not only are you going to be getting spam emails to no end, but now you're getting emails that look real, that are written by AI and are complicated and layered. And this is going to add challenges ahead. Now, there are a couple other things that are important about the new technology. One of them that impacts my view on what's going to happen with the trade war is the quantum computing patent stuff, right? That now becomes sort of a national security risk because China has quantum key distribution, and the red line that's really high is the number of Chinese patents around quantum. The blue line, which is a lot lower, are US patents for quantum. So there are also some national security ripples here. But that's not the only area as we look at data problems maybe in the next couple of years where we see data issues, right? Obviously, there's an election coming up, and there's going to be maybe some problems. I am concerned about what happened in the last cycle with ads, and social media was weaponized. Even recently, though, the Russians have been claiming now the US is somehow using Facebook and social media to weaponize the population in terms of social conflict. But look, this time is never different, right? By the way, this is something every economist ever said, except for maybe Fed Chairman Jay Powell at Jackson Hole in August 2019. For those of you who want my dismal view on the economy, see if you can get the video from the last panel. So we won't go too dark there, but this time's never different. Elections are always about following the money, which is why I wrote the optimistically titled book, The Dumpster Fire Election. It's a nonpartisan tome about what we're going to see in 2020. The reason things are going to be particularly polarized isn't just because of social media, it's because of the numbers. And this might be tough to see. On the left is a chart, this is from Pew Research, of the percent of people who always vote, and on the right are the people who always donate. Interestingly, people who are consistently liberal are 50% more likely to vote than people who are moderates. People who are consistently conservative are twice as likely to vote as moderates. More importantly, people who are consistently liberal are almost 4 times as likely to donate to a candidate as a moderate, and people who are consistently conservative are over 3 times as likely to donate as a moderate. So I ask you, why would you ever pitch to the middle? They don't pay, they don't vote. Follow the money, gang. It's going to be a dumpster fire. I'm just saying. So, yeah, it will. So, as I think about other data that's maybe more prescient for a board member on a longer term, we've talked some headline stuff. I want to talk about the value of trend line over headline. And perhaps the most important thing, these are demographics. This is population growth, and this is in millions, of planet Earth. And the important takeaway is, in 2050, there will be about 2.1 billion more people on planet Earth than there are now. So 30 years from now, over 2 billion more people, right? Most of them are going to be in least developed countries. The second thing is that over the next 20 years, real per capita GDP is going to go up a lot. And it's going to go up a lot in emerging markets. If you look at, say, China, where real per capita GDP is about $15,000 now, in about 20 years, it'll be over $40,000. India, right, less than 10 now, it'll be over 20. So emerging market wealth is going to rise disproportionately, and there's going to be a lot more people in emerging markets, and they will be a lot wealthier. So in terms of thinking about data and business strategy for your organizations, these global dynamics are important to keep in mind. Demographics are aircraft carriers that don't turn quickly. I'd also like to mention another trend line that I think is very important for the economy, and that's e-commerce. I want you to think of a number, and this number is the percent of retail sales in the United States right now that is e-commerce. I want you to think of a number, all that stuff you order online, what percent of the retail sales right now is e-commerce? And I know how smart this group is, so I know you're all thinking about 10.7%. What, were you thinking of something bigger, perhaps? Right? Well, don't worry, it will be, but it's not right now. And that's going to continue to rise. A couple other big trends to consider is that the number of activist investor demands in 2018 hit a record level on a global basis. Also in the US, it hit a record. About 39% of those activist investor demands were tied to environmental topics, whether it was climate change or sustainability or something else in the environment. That's going to increase. What's also going to increase is the number that are related to things like data privacy and data and those sorts of things. So as we think about opportunities and risks for data in the years ahead, that's going to be really important from a governance standpoint, and there will be pushback. Also important to keep in mind, these are some numbers from 2007, that if you look at big data, there was a survey done by New Vantage Partners of where the big successes have been in data. And the biggest area of success, that's the blue bar here, where you started to see value is decreasing expenses, right? Doing spend analysis is nothing new. A lot more companies do it than did it a decade ago, but that's a big value. The next one is finding new innovation areas, but the areas where the blue bar is kind of low is transforming the business for the future, which almost half the companies hadn't started, and establishing a data-driven culture where companies had started it but not seen value. It is very tough to create a data-driven culture. And it gets back to that whole idea of everyone's talking buzzwords and people don't know how to use pivot tables, right? So this is like a real thing. And you have asymmetric risks within companies because that knowledge sometimes needs backfill. So, a couple thoughts and recommendations to build a culture of data. It's like war. You go to battle with the data you have, not the data you want. And so one of the recommendations I'd have, and I'd push you on, and we talked about data nightmares, is to think about your data dreams, right? And now that might be a weird thing, right? Like I live in data, so that's a different thing. But what data do you wish existed right now? We had this discussion in the Navigating the Fog of Data session yesterday in the workshop, and people were thinking about what data they wished existed. And oftentimes, you can create that data, or it may exist somewhere. So I would encourage you to go back to your boards and think about what data you wished you had right now. Because there's a really good Chinese proverb about this. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And so if you want to start having the data to make a meaningful transformation in the businesses you advise and you serve, you need to start getting that data in place now for the future. And the third thing, which I've talked about for communication, ask folks to explain things simply. Tell them to avoid the buzzword bingo and ask for that and do it yourselves as well. Now, the last thing, as an economist, I feel comfort in knowing that some data is always the same, right? So when I think about financial markets, I'm sure we all know, right? There's two things that will always drive financial markets. You guys know what they are, right? Supply and demand? Come on, guys. It's fear and greed. You know that. I know you guys got that. All right, well, thank you very much. It has been my pleasure to speak to you today. Thank you.